Good morning, and let us pray. O God, our Heavenly Father, we come before you this day, asking your blessing upon Her Gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, and upon her representative in this province. Give to each member of this legislature a strong and abiding sense of the great responsibilities laid upon us. Guide us here in our deliberations. Give us a deep and thorough understanding of the needs of the people we serve. Help us to use power wisely and well, and inspire us to decisions which establish and maintain a land of prosperity and righteousness, where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Amen. Not Père.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Orders of the day. I recognize the Government House Leader.
G159.
Order G159, resuming the debate adjourned on March 11th, 2020, on the motion for second reading of Bill 159, an act to amend various statutes in respect of consumer protection.
Further debate.
Further debate. Further debate. The member for Niagara Falls.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting start to the morning, Mr. Speaker. So I'm talking on Bill 159, and I'm going to be talking for about 20 minutes. Those that don't know, I was a critic that actually took on Tarion going back a few years ago. But what we want to start by saying, and we can all agree to this, we don't agree to a lot of things on both sides of the House, but I think we can agree to this, Mr. Speaker. Buying a home is our biggest investment. And when you save to buy your home, you expect a home builder to make sure that it's built correctly. And yes, I want to, off the hop, say there are a lot of great home builders in the province of Ontario. Unfortunately, in the province of Ontario, there are some that aren't so great. And they're the ones that we're talking about in this bill. And when you buy your home, what shouldn't happen after you buy your home and you end up with mold, you end up with rats in your home, you end up with all kinds of issues around that particular home, what you shouldn't have to do is fight Tarion to protect you, because that's what they're there for. And they haven't done that for years, and we know that. This is strictly about protecting home builders. And think about this, Mr. Speaker, because I know you're not here that long. You have somebody replace you in the mornings for a while. Think about this. The developer who built the home is regulating himself. And Tarion, what they're doing is supporting the builder instead of what they're supposed to be mandated to do, and that is support the homeowner. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleagues, those that are listening, in Niagara Falls, I'm from Niagara Falls, my riding's in Niagara Falls, but I also have Fort Erie. And I have to say them all, and I apologize for that, because if I don't, they say, well, you forgot about me. But I represent Crystal Beach, which a lot of people are familiar with, Ridgeway, I do Niagara-on-the-Lake, Niagara Falls, Queenston, Virgil, Old Town. And we have problems with our builders in my own riding. And how do I know that? Because the homeowners come to me and say, Gatesy, I got a problem. This is what's going on. Leaky roofs. Like I said, there's a section in one of my communities that is rat infested because there was no insulation put into the homes. They were able to get into the homes or into their attics. Think about that. After you saved your entire life to buy a home, and now they can't get it fixed because they're arguing about it. It's absolutely wrong what's going on. And the NDP asked the Auditor General for an independent investigation of Tarion, and the AG Investigations confirmed what our suspicions were, the NDP suspicions were, for a long time. And think about this. We've been arguing in this House. I wouldn't say arguing, I guess that's not the right word. Debating, I guess, is the right word. Sometimes loudly. Over a 1% increase to teachers, education workers, healthcare workers. Over 1%. Listen to this. Tarion executives took 30 to 60% bonuses for making the agency more lucrative. Think about more lucrative, it's an interesting word, meaning management benefited personally from turning down claims. Does that make sense to you? It's very similar, and I was trying to figure out what would be similar to that. It's really similar to WSIB, where they deem you that you have a job that isn't there, but then they cut your benefit. And as we know, what goes on with WSIB. And this is the one that really bothers me. Tarion relicensed shady builders, and that's in the report, that's what they call them, shady builders, who were demonstrating problematic behavior. Builders are getting away with not paying for costs incurred to resolve defects, and Tarion is still relicensing that. So here they get a number of complaints about a builder. That would tell me that there's a problem with that particular builder. And I want to say there's a lot of good builders in the province of Ontario. There's a lot in Niagara that are good. But there are some that might not be as good. They're relicensing them even though that they're causing problems where people are buying their homes. And you cannot go on a website or anything and say, you know, Gates's Builders, just use my name because it's easier, Gates's Builders is not doing their job. They're not building quality homes. Yet if I go purchase Gates's home, there's no way for me to know he's shady. No, I know, but I'm just using my name. It's easier. I don't want to use a builder's name. That wouldn't be fair to him either. So, and then the other one is they have a board, which is fair. They got a board. They're a private organization. They have a board, but you know what it is? It's heavy with home builders, which means they regulate themselves. Would it not make sense? And I'm asking the Speaker as he's nodding his head to me. So I think he's actually agreeing with me this morning, so that's good. But what I'm trying to say here is you have a board that's got mostly home builders on it and a couple, I think it's only one actually, one homeowner. Would it not make sense to have a board that's equal? So you could at least have that discussion. That would make sense to me, but no, that doesn't happen here. And then they set timelines that we can't think. So I'm going to get into my formal part of my speech because I saw this as I was going through all the notes. And there's lots of notes here on this. But I want to say to my colleagues, and please, I know you guys are busy and you got lots to do over there and we're allowed to play on our phones now, but I want you to listen to this because this is important. It's important to all of us. Something happens, this is true. I haven't been on that side yet, but I know it's true because I've seen the examples. We're heading that way in a couple years, by the way. I'm just letting you guys know. I'm giving you advice right now. So this is why I'm concerned about this. So I'm going to read something that was said by a PC member, and I think it was in 2017, December 6th. I'm going to read it out for you so you can all hear it. I'm trying to figure out what happens when you say something on this side, and then you get elected to go to that side. So I'm trying to find out, I'm talking to the maintenance people here, is there something different in the water on this side that's in the water on that side? There isn't. So I can't figure out why you say something over here, and yet when you go over there, it's completely different. So I think it's fair, I think it's reasonable to quote somebody that said something here. It's in Hansard. Everybody can take a look at it. So if I may, I'd like to start by quoting something from December 6, 2017. And this is coming from the PC caucus, by the way. The concerns of the PC caucus and many stakeholders who warned of the failure of this bill to address key issues in the industry it affects has gone unaddressed by the government, meaning the Liberals. And we all know how bad the Liberals were. We got to give them credit. They were terrible. I'm going to say that right off the top. We know that. It is only right for us at this point in time to point out some of these issues before the government proclaims this bill into legislation. And that's being said by the PCs. I want that to be clear, who's saying it. First and foremost, portions of Bill 166, and that was the bill at the time, that reforms new home warranties in Ontario only reflects some of the outcomes in the Cunningham report. Justin Cunningham was commissioned by this government to look at Tarion and the administration of new home warranties. The minister at the time seemed to want to predetermine the review outcome when he said they expect the review to find Tarion doing a good job and meeting expectations of protecting consumers. And if I was allowed to say anything in this House, I would use some adjectives for that. To say he missed the mark would have been an understatement. And again, this is what the PCs are saying. Justice Cunningham built an unassailable argument that Tarion was not doing its job and was beset by conflict of loyalties arising from its structure. It was only an avenue of new home builders to be licensed and for consumers to receive compensation for shoddy building work. Shoddy building work. As administrative authority, Tarion had the majority of its board of directors composed of the same people it regulated, licensed, and for which the common warranty fund it paid consumers who complained about the builder's work. And again, I'm reading this from Hansard by a Conservative. And I just wish they'd listen because it's one of your colleagues. Maybe you can ask him after I finish my presentation why he said this. Tarion wore too many hats. Out of sight of government, think about that, out of sight of government, and that for over a decade allowed Tarion to drift apart from government leadership and oversight. It shielded from key accountability legislation, including such measures as the AG oversight, which the government rejected again when the opportunity insert into the Tarion government legislation during clause by clause. And again, this is being said by the Conservatives. Not by me, not by the NDP. Tarion, like any other administrative authority within this ministry, mandates that businesses practice in the field it regulates become members and pay substantial fees to the regulator. Membership of Tarion is not by choice. And for the new members from the PCs, I'm going to read that for you in case you guys don't know that in the bill. Membership of Tarion is not by choice, and any agency with such a captive consistency should be made transparent and accountable. Madam Speaker, welcome. As you likely have come to the conclusion, and I've kind of helped you along the way, that was from one of my friends who is currently a member of the PC caucus, the Stowmount, Dundas, South Glengarry, and currently a sitting member of your government. That's who said that. So you're on this side, you're agreeing with the NDP, you're agreeing with the AG on all the problems that we got with Tarion, that we're not protecting home builders, yet then you go on that side and all of a sudden the water's different. I don't understand it, it doesn't. This was a speech he gave when the previous Liberal government, and I've already said the Liberals didn't do a very good job for 15 years. So it's clear that the PCs knew, and I'm including all the members that are here today, it's clear the PCs knew what was wrong and what needed to be fixed. They absolutely knew that. And like us, you have caucus meetings. I'm sure you talked about the bill with your caucus. So let's how this action match up with their own words. The member says, and I quote, so I'm spending the first, how many minutes have I got?
8.
Lots.
Lots. Almost the whole morning.
I'm quoting what you guys have said. So you guys know there's a problem with Tarion. And the problem is, quite frankly, that when I buy my home, I want it to be built right the first time. And yeah, there may be some defects in it, but I shouldn't have to fight to get that compensation when I'm told I got to pay into it to go. So this is a quote, by the way, Madam Speaker. It's not coming from me, it's a quote right out of Hansard. First and foremost, portion of Bill 166 that reforms the new home warranty in Ontario only reflects some of the outcomes of the Cunningham report. To date, The PCs have publicly said they will implement only 29 of Justice Cunningham's suggestions. Yet they won't tell us, and think about this, my colleagues, listen to this, because maybe you'll tell me after I do my 20 minutes. Madam Speaker, think about this. To date, the PCs have publicly said they will implement 29 Justice Cunningham suggestions. But listen to this part. Yet they won't tell us or the media, because you don't let media in a lot of times, particularly at your conventions, or homeowners, which of the actual recommendations they're going to implement. So they're saying they're going to do 29, but it's a secret. Nobody's going to know. They're not telling us. They're not telling the media. They're not telling the home buyer. He went on to say, Tarion had the majority of its board of directors composed of the same people it regulated, licensed, and for who common warranty fine it paid consumers who complained about the builder's work. This bill will see some enabling legislation that may, and that's the key word when you're bargaining anything, you know, it doesn't say will. Will's a stronger word, shall's a stronger word, may. They may not. It's just a weasel word. That's kind of what it is. Just what it is. One day allow the government to address this issue, depending on who is in power. Given their concerns in 2017, why was this not more forcefully dealt with in this bill? And I just don't mean by the board. I mean the whole process. Legislate a fair board. Get rid of this enabling legislation. Frankly, anyone looking at Tarion today can see that the home builders have had a free rein over an organization most of its lifetime. They have controlled the board, they have controlled the proceedings, and they've controlled its direction. And that's wrong. It's wrong in the province of Ontario. It's certainly wrong for people that buy homes. All the while, residents across Ontario have been denied the right to get insurance for their massive defects. Madam Speaker, do you think that's right? I'm pretty sure you don't. Insurance, by the way, that is supposed to be offered by the builder first, and Tarion is the last resort. So what's supposed to happen, I build the house for you, I find some defects, the builder's supposed to fix them. But when they refuse, Tarion's supposed to be there as the insurance company to help us. Instead, listen to this, instead Tarion has just become an arm of denial. Very similar to what I said about WSIB and the deeming bill. Same type of thing. Just say no. Just get rid of them. Madam Speaker, nowhere is there more evident that Tarion's home builder's registration, where any person in Ontario should be able to pull up a name of that builder and see the faulty homes they have built in the past and see where they cut corners. That is so important. So if you've got a terrible builder that has a reputation of building terrible homes, you can't even pull up the name to say, don't buy a home from this guy because it's hidden. You're not told when you buy that home. And Tarion allows that to go on. That's wrong. Madam Speaker, I know when it comes to designing license plates, this government has a hard time. But how does it take over a decade to design a website that properly tracks these things? Over a decade. Madam Speaker, I want to be clear. This is not an issue with all home builders, or even most home builders. I have a lot of friends who are home builders in Niagara. Most are decent, honest people who are glad to do their work and make a living. And when I talk to those home builders, you know what they tell me? They don't want to protect somebody that's not building those homes correctly because it reflects on the entire industry. And they're right. So the home builders are saying to me, fix it. We don't want shoddy home builders in Niagara. We don't want it in Ontario. Fix it. Because I take pride in the work I do. And I agree with that. Not only do the home builders take pride, the workers take pride too as well. But there are massive holes for the bad ones. The bad ones who go on to be defended by the same shoddy spokesperson for these groups. Enough is enough, Madam Speaker. This system will work fine if we tighten the belt of these guys for the simple fact that most home builders don't want to rip off people. We get that? They don't want to rip off people. If you look at home defects, you can see that these builders are cutting corners to try and make a buck. We hear stories of companies refusing to pay overtime or mileage, so they ship in guys from Toronto who have to drive to Niagara, do all their work without charging miles. So what happens? We end up, instead of putting in 8 hours, they put in 3. It's a recipe for disaster. Sometimes these disasters are small, sometimes it's poorly placed floorboards or cheap material. But sometimes, I want my colleagues to hear this, it's deadly. Sometimes it takes people. What it did to Daniel Emmer. I know my colleague reads Daniel Emery's story in his hour lead. We're talking about people suffering from health issues because of mold. Mold that there's because of poor workmanship. So what happens with mold? People lose their insurance. When they lose their insurance, they lose their mortgage. When they lose their mortgage, they lose their homes. This is also criminal, and it shouldn't happen in Ontario. Madam Speaker, I'd like to go back to my colleague's speech. And then I'm going to quote this from him. Membership of Tarion is not by choice, and any agent in such a captive constituent should be made transparent and accountable. And on that point, he's right. People are forced to pay into Tarion, but it's even worse. They're forced to pay out of their pocket when they need to take on Tarion. So if you got a problem and you got to take on Tarion, they won't fix it. If you're rich, you can probably fight with Tarion. But if you just scraped up enough money to buy that home, you can't do it. Maybe if you're well off, you can afford to do this, but many can't. Many sink their savings into their house, and that's all there is. So when they need to go down the costly process of fighting Tarion, they simply can't do it. Madam Speaker, towards the end of my friend's speech, he had this to say. The government proposal on Tarion reforms fall drastically short of reforms contemplated by Justice Cunningham and consumers' expectation. But I think of no better way to sum up this government's bill and his statement. This government has been in this committee, they've been in this chamber for years. People like Tracy Wheeler, just like Daniel, they have to put their lives on hold to try and fight for justice. Justice they're entitled to, and most insulting, justice they are forced to pay into. This government has a real chance to reform Tarion, to tear down this failed system and rebuild it into a system that respects consumers and does not beholden to big interests. The focus less on buying tables at home builders' dinners and more on fixing kitchens and homeowners' houses. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and responses? Okay, I recognize the member from London North Centre.
I'd like to thank the member from Niagara Falls for his excellent comments, and I really appreciated the fact that he pointed out the correlation between Tarion and the system in WSIB. It makes a great deal of sense. We see systems that need a complete overhaul. The Auditor General, as the member has pointed out, indicated that Tarion's executives were enriching themselves at consumers' expense, and yet the Conservative government is doing nothing. My question, why are the Conservatives continuing the Liberal scheme of allowing Tarion to continue to enrich themselves at every homeowner's expense?
Well,
Answer, the member from Niagara Falls.
sorry, Madam Speaker. What I want to say to you is that I only got through half my presentation because I did touch on the issue around CEO compensation. Do you know that the head of Tarion is making close to $800,000? And they've given themselves 30 to 60% bonus, and the bonus is that they deny people to get their homes fixed. They are there for the homeowner. And that's the problem with this entire bill. It's a problem with what's going on in Ontario. And we've had stories of people that have not only lost their home, they've ended up homeless. And they've suffered mental stress. And that's an issue for me. So I appreciate the question. Thank you very much.
Questions and responses? I recognize the member from Markham Thornhill.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and thank you through you to member from Niagara Falls. Thank you for his passion and thank you for his eloquent speech. And Madam Speaker, this bill, the Consumer Protection Act, is outdated. It's outdated for a long time. And that's why our government wanted to make a reasonable change. We want to bring the confidence to the consumers. That's what we call it, rebuilding their consumer confidence through this act. And that's what our government committed, our ministers committed. That's what we're trying to do some changes, Madam Speaker. My question through you to member, my opposite, the Consumer Protection Act is outdated and doesn't address the need of consumer in the present climate. Does the member opposite understand how important the proposed legislation in order to protect our consumers? Thank you.
Answer, the member from Niagara Falls.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what's outdated, sir. That you did not take into every recommendation by Cunningham in his report. That's what's outdated. And what you should be doing is protecting homeowners. And I'm going to look at you while I say this. Protect the homeowners. Because you know what? It could be your son, it could be your daughter buying their first home, and they buy their first home, and what happens is it falls apart. There's mold in the basement. The attic has rats in it. There's no insulation put in between the walls. That's what's wrong. And the reason why I read what the PC said going back in 2017 is that you know it. This isn't a secret to any of us. This isn't the first time we debated this issue. We debated this issue a few years ago. And I know you weren't here, but you are now. Talk to your colleagues who stood up and said how bad Tarion is, how bad the industry is. That's what's wrong.
Thank you. A reminder to all members to please direct their remarks to and through the chair. Further questions? Member from London North Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. You know, the member from Niagara Falls, through you, Speaker, has called Tarion the arm of denial, a lot like WSIB. Yesterday in the media, we heard the Premier saying, as it relates to the COVID-19 outbreak, that he stands on the side of businesses. It doesn't say that he stands on the side of people, which is in direct contrast to many of the bumper sticker slogans that we see from this government. But my question for the member from Niagara Falls is, we saw that the member from Humber River Black Creek tabled legislation that was going to implement all of the recommendations from Justice Cunningham's 2017 report. Why is this Conservative government continuing Liberal plans of not implementing these recommendations?
Answer, the member from Niagara Falls.
All right, I did it right. Yeah. I got it. The Labour minister's smiling at me. What I'm trying to get out this morning, that the NDP knows how to fix this problem. But I'm going to say that the PCs know too. And that's why I don't understand why you didn't fix it in the bill. And my colleagues have to tell me why. I can tell you that on this side of the House, I'm always going to stand up for the person that's buying his home. Because you know what? At the end of the day, when we spend 40, 50, 60, 70 years here while we're alive, the one thing that we own is our home. The one thing we can pass on to our kids and our grandkids is our home. We have our family dinners. You know, I'm married to an Italian. We used to have our lunches every Sunday, our pasta lunches.
Response?
That was my response. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Thank you.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Cambridge.
Good morning as well to the member from Niagara Falls. Thank you for that. I always enjoy listening to you get up and debate. You always have a lot of passion with everything, so thank you for that. So to the member opposite, if the government were to choose a multi-provider insurance model as you're advocating for, how can you guarantee that insurance companies will be transparent and act in the best interest of the consumers? Thank you.
Well, that's a good question.
Answer, the member from Niagara Falls.
I'm working hard, Madam Speaker. I'm working hard on this. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to read this out because I think it's fair. Two of my colleagues, Rosero and Jagmeet Singh, tabled bills to fix this. Okay, so they tabled the bill. But nothing really changed until 2017, when an NDP MP, and his name was Wayne Gates, you might have heard of him, successfully tabled an amendment to Bill 166 that for the first time gave the AG the authority to investigate Tarion. Shortly after that, the NPP successfully tabled a motion before the Public Accounts Committee in January 2018 requesting that the AG conduct such an investigation. Her October 30th, 2019 report is a response to that request.
Response.
That's how you get it fixed. That's how you make sure they're held accountable for what they're doing and on their denials. So if they're going to deny it, okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, very good speech today, Wayne, on this situation. I want to know why does Tarion notify people that their appeal period is expired? They never do. And why, how are they going to enforce their own rules, which they don't do now? And I've had hundreds of complaints about expirations and lack of following through. They don't have inspectors. They just, they give you a nice little booklet when you start with your home ownership, and they don't even follow their own rules in the booklet. What would you say to that?
Answer, the member from Niagara Falls.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's always nice to hear compliments coming from my colleague from Stony Creek. I want to say that they haven't followed it because the board is controlled by the builders, and that's what has to people understand. We've all, I'm not sure if we've all been on boards, but I've been on the United Way board, and we've had community people on the board, so they had a say in it. But when it's 11 builders and one home builder, what message are you going to get? The message is that the home builders are driving that message. And that's the problem. It's the problem with this whole system. And I don't know, for the love of me, I can't figure this out. Why would you not stick up for homeowners in your ridings?
Response.
Okay, I got a couple seconds left then. Why would you not stick up for the home? I thought it was somebody called me. Okay, thank you.
There's not enough time for another round of questions and responses. Order, please. Further debate. I recognize the member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
Good morning, Speaker, and everyone in the House, and thank you. I'm pleased that our government is taking consumer protection so seriously, and I thank the Minister for bringing this bill forward. As the Minister alluded to last week, while every ministry, agency, board and commission is vital to the operations of the provincial government, the public institutions that serve Ontarians under the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services are especially important. Whether it's Service Ontario, issuing birth and death certificates, photo ID cards, or driver's licenses. The Provincial Archives filing and protecting documents and records to protect Ontario's wonderful history for future generations. The Technical Safety and Standards Authority providing public safety services and ensuring technical compliance on behalf of the government to elevators, escalators, fuels, amusement park rides, ski lifts and much more. The direct administration of one of over 55 acts the Ministry is responsible for, covering everything from condominiums to motor vehicle dealers, business names to horse riding safety, the travel industry to film classification, retail holidays to new home warranties. Or the support services and programs provided by the Ministry to support other areas of government and over 60,000 members of the Ontario Public Service, such as administration, procurement, pay and benefits. The Ministry touches every single Ontarian at multiple points throughout their lives. This is why it's so important to make sure that the programs, services, legislation and regulations under this Ministry are up to date and doing their jobs. Supporting the people of Ontario, the businesses of Ontario and the government of Ontario, all while maintaining the highest standards of safety, compliance and consumer protection. This bill is an important one, and it's also unique with respect to its journey through this chamber, in that we moved right into public consultations before second reading of this bill. And what this did was it allowed us to make full use of the winter adjournment to travel this bill around the province and hear from various stakeholders and individuals on how we can make it better. The Standing Committee on Justice Policy, which I had the pleasure of joining briefly on its first day of consultations, met over 4 days in Brampton, Windsor, Ottawa and Toronto, spanning across the province to gather feedback and bring us a stronger, amended bill with greater achieves its purpose. And as we can see by looking through all the strikeouts and underlines in the reprinted bill, there are many changes made through these amendments that were guided by the feedback we received on the bill. And great feedback, by the way. And the reason we received so much feedback is because stakeholders and individuals recognize that things are no longer working as intended. I'll start with the Tarion Warranty Corporation and the government's proposed changes to Ontario New Home Warranties Act and the New Home Construction Licensing Act. Buying a home for most of the population is the biggest investment in their lives. And for the biggest investment of one's life, people require the strongest protections to have confidence in the purchase and life-changing decisions. People are often frustrated with the quality of construction of new homes and subsequently must deal with a warranties and protection system that is complex, lengthy, and confusing. They want to be confident they are hiring a reputable builder to build their home and expect strong warranties and protections that they can depend on, with strong oversight and enforcement of clear rules for builders. But that currently isn't the case, Speaker. The proposed changes to the Acts would, if passed, respond to the special report on Tarion released by the Auditor General last year and further achieve three main goals. They would overhaul the current warranty and protection program by requiring Tarion to enter into a binding agreement with the Minister of Government and Consumer Services to strengthen oversight and Tarion's accountability and providing them with a stronger mandate in consumer protection. They would enhance the dispute resolution and claims process by providing Tarion with the ability to use the range of processes to resolve dispute between homeowners and builders or vendors. Restoring balance for consumers by removing builders and vendors as parties at the License Appeal Tribunal in disputes between homeowners and Tarion over warranties and protection claims, absent competing regulations, and enabling the government to prescribe adjudicative bodies other than the License Appeal Tribunal to resolve disputes between homeowners and Tarion over warranties and protection claims. The changes would also promote the construction of better-built homes by requiring Tarion to increase the scrutiny of applications to build or sell a new home to better prevent bad actors from operating, and establishing a mandate for Tarion to promote the construction of properly built homes. In November, the Minister took steps to tip the Tarion scales back in favour of consumers who thought that for too long the corporation inherently favoured builders and developers. By the time the House returned, the Tarion Board of Directors will be decreased to better align the board size with other boards and authorities from 16 members to 12. No more than 34%, or realistically one-third, of this board can be builders, vendors, or industry associations or their agents. As I said last week, and maintain still, the previous makeup of the board most definitely leaned towards developers and didn't really help consumers at all. Now, these people do need to be represented on the board to be held accountable, but should not hold the majority and never should have. We are also proposing legislative and regulatory changes to condominium living. We've heard loud and clear from stakeholders that the people lack clear processes to navigate condo living because it is different from other types of housing. People also expect better, faster and cheaper digital services, as well as the need for more transparency and accountability when buying and living in a condo. Recent regulatory changes have been made to provide condo owners, corporations, purchasers and mortgagees with improved access to 17 forms made under the Condo Act. They are now available through the Condominium Authority of Ontario's website, where other information is available. Owners and prospective owners now have a one-stop shop for all the information they require, rather than having to visit the Ministry's websites separately. Of course, the Minister retains the responsibility for the forms and their content, but we will collaborate with condo authorities to make improvements. The government is currently consulting on changes to develop a variety of proposed regulatory changes to provide condo corporations with clear processes and rules for the procurement of services and goods and financial management of condo reserve funds, increase the amount of interest that would be owed to a buyer by a developer on their deposits if their pre-construction condo project is cancelled and in other circumstances, provide clearer processes for occupancy fees and chargebacks, develop a condo guide for buyers and require developers to provide it at the point of purchase. This will better equip condo purchasers with information on easy-to-understand format and clarify the processes for mediation or arbitration between condo corporations and owners. Another issue we have been hearing about across Ontario is the Condominium Authority Tribunal system and how long and extensive it can be for cases brought before the tribunal to be resolved. That is why we are expanding the scope of topics that the tribunal can mediate, such as nuisances and smells. This will not only expedite the process by which condo owners can reach a resolution dispute that they have with their neighbours, but it also provides an alternative level of dispute resolution instead of using limited resources that are in the legal system. This is an example of the government's cross-ministry, holistic approach to addressing the issues and concerns that affect Ontarians. We are hitting two birds with one stone here, so to speak. I've been talking a lot about protections for housing, and while these changes are important and underlined by the investment required in these transactions, they are far from the only changes being proposed in this bill. We're also looking at amending the Consumer Protection Act itself. Legislative amendments introduced through this bill would enable the provincial government to issue administrative monetary penalties, or AMPs, against businesses that do not comply with the Consumer Protection Act. If this bill is passed, the government will consult with industry early this year on regulations that would be required in order to implement the administrative monetary penalties scheme in an orderly and effective manner. We've seen in other areas, both municipally and provincially, that administrative monetary policies are an effective tool to encourage compliance with the law and discourage deceptive and predatory practices. Adding AMPs to the Ministry's enforcement toolbox would bring our Consumer Protection Act in line with other provinces and be an additional way to enforce the Act. Would it work for everything? No. Part of the Ministry's ongoing consultations would include determining which infractions would be subject to AMPs and determining what those penalty amounts would be for these offences. We will also be conducting an overall review of the Consumer Protection Act. This would be the first comprehensive review of the Act in 15 years. 15 years is a long time in any context, but this past 15 years is especially significant. Think about it. 15 years ago, Amazon was primarily selling books. Netflix was only mailing DVDs. And you actually had to go into a store and walk through an aisle to do most of your shopping. What I'm getting at is that there has been a massive change in technology and marketplace innovation. To continue to be effective, the Act needs to be updated to strengthen protection for consumers. The review will also streamline and clarify requirements to improve consumer and business understanding and support compliance and include effective enforcement powers and tools to deter non-compliance. One of the important changes that this bill makes in Schedule 10 is to the Ticket Sales Act. Like many of us here, most Ontarians have likely purchased a ticket to a sporting event, concert, or other form of entertainment online. The Internet has provided extra opportunities for consumers to find good deals on these tickets, but also produces vulnerabilities that can be exploited by retailers, especially resellers. If something's too good to be true, it probably is. In the rush to get an excellent deal, you may rush through the checkout, only to later realize that you weren't being charged in Canadian dollars. After currency exchange and additional currency conversion fees, once they're processed, this can represent a significant additional cost to a purchaser. We are proposing updates to the Ticket Sales Act to ensure that all dollar amounts in ticket offers are listed and charged in Canadian currency. Being able to buy concert tickets online and know exactly how much they are costing you would make your experience that much better and encourage more Ontarians to support local events. We will also further consult on proposed regulations under the Ticket Sales Act to improve protection, transparency and choice for consumers buying tickets to Ontario events. The consultations will include securing feedback on items that promote choice, including ensuring ticket purchasers can transfer their tickets and that consumers who don't have smartphones or want paper tickets can get them upon request. Like the proposed changes to the Consumer Protection Act I mentioned previously, we will consult on new administrative monetary policies under this Act to discourage bad behaviour by the industry and promote compliance. And our proposals under this bill don't stop there, Speaker. The Ministry is also proposing changes to strengthen enforcement and transparency measures to improve elevator safety and availability. We are proposing stronger enforcement tools to improve compliance with elevator safety laws, data collection with respect to elevator outages to better inform policy development, and publication of outage data online to educate and inform consumers. We will be consulting on these changes very soon this year. As we know, the condo industry is booming, especially here in the GTA. More skyscrapers means more elevators. Out-of-service elevators lead to accessibility and quality of life issues for vulnerable populations, including seniors and especially those with disabilities. And access to reliability and service data will ensure that Ontarians have the information they need to be informed about their place of residence. We intend to do everything we can to ensure compliance with all elevator safety laws and adequate elevator performance. We are working with the Technical Safety and Standards Authority to resolve current safety issues in the sector and bring the safety compliance rate to an acceptable level. We are also considering changes that would require elevator outage data to be reported to and be posted online by the TSSA as a transparency measure. These changes are aimed at improving elevator performance in your building by promoting better maintenance. You would also be able to find more informed choice and outages online to make more informed choices, which is important in the terms, especially in accessibility. There are also several other changes we are considering under regulation that the Minister announced as part of our plan to rebuild consumer confidence. Some of these changes affect the travel industry. Again, Speaker, this is an industry that has rapidly changed over time, and it's our responsibility to ensure that the industry is regulated to protect consumers by not over-regulated to put Ontario at a disadvantage against global operators and other competitors. We intend to address concerns we have heard from Ontarians by updating the disclosure and advertising rules to help improve protections for consumers, introducing new steps to increase employee accountability through a requirement for salespersons to register and meet requirements in continuing education, and providing the regulator with additional compliance tools to better address bad conduct, amongst other things. Another piece of legislation that we are reviewing and consulting on is the Collection and Debt Settlement Services Act, to address concerns that debtors who are struggling to pay their creditors are not being sufficiently protected from harassment by debt collectors. The government will be consulting in 2020 to help identify potential changes to the Act to ensure debt settlement service providers abide by the rules. I had countless constituents come to me with issues regarding collection and debt settlement, and I'm sure many members of the House have experienced the same. Sometimes the constituent actually does owe the debt and is having trouble paying. But there are also instances, far more than there should be, where they have already paid their debts, never owed anything, or are the wrong person altogether. But the calls don't stop. We will take action to improve protections for consumers in this regard, as well as educate them to what their rights and responsibilities are. And in conclusion, I'm running out of time, so here I will wrap up. This ministry and the Honourable Minister have done an excellent job here. These are long overdue changes that are needed to protect consumers while at the same time keeping our province open for business. They've done due diligence consulting with individuals, with stakeholders, and we travelled the bill through committee across the province and have made amendments to the bill better. I was proud to see this House come together and unanimously pass this minister's last piece of legislation, and I really hope together we will see that again. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Questions and responses. I recognize the member from London North Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member from Mississauga-Streetsville for her comments. A little concerned when I hear the word consultations come from this government, because we see expensive things that are sometimes buried and hidden. But for my question, I'd like to turn to recommendation number 6 from the Auditor General's report. We understand that the Globe and Mail uncovered documents from Tarion in 2020 revealing that Tarion is backing away from the arbitrary and unfair 30-day deadline for filing claims, which is one of the recommendations to get rid of that. Is this an example of accountability and transparency, allowing this to continue and not following that recommendation?
Answer. Member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
Thank you, Speaker. And I really want to thank the member opposite for the question, because it is very, very important. I sat in when we were on public accounts and I listened to members from Tarion speak, and I certainly had a long time listening to the Auditor General and her recommendations, and I was actually quite shocked that Tarion has been operating the way it has been operating all of this time with no changes put in place. And understanding there have been many, many recommendations. When we travelled this bill, and I know when I was joining them in Brampton, we heard loud and clear about some of the changes that must come and will come. But we really are looking at ways on how we can make the Tarion warranty program work for everything. And one of the things we really wanted to make sure that happened right away was going to change the makeup of the board so that not more than 1/3 of the board can be made up of developers, builders, or their agents. Thank you.
Further questions? I recognize the member from Brampton West.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, our government is listening to the needs and concerns of the consumers to help better protect them, and that's why throughout the last year, 2019, we have been consulting on 3 main pillars. That is protecting the privacy of Ontarians, enabling the businesses to compete digitally, and enabling better, smarter, and more efficient government. So my question to the member from Mississauga-Streetsville is that what are the major concerns driving the changes to consumer protection in Ontario? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Answer. The member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
So there was no doubt. I want to thank the member from Brampton West.
Order.
And I know he's spent quite a bit of time, excuse me, working and consulting. And many of us, I know, on our side of the House, and I have listened intently to members on the other side of the House, and what the things that they want to see us make changes with, whether it be ticket sales. But I think the one big item that we heard a lot about was the Tarion warranty program. It has, unbelievably, for so long, been the same way, the same old, the people that were on the board, the way they were compensated, it was appalling. There's nothing short of that. And I know that when we were on committee and the members opposite were very vocal in how they wanted to make sure that changes to Tarion were made swiftly, which is why we wanted to make sure we got it into this bill. But we didn't wait. We didn't wait. We made sure that we got out and we started consultations immediately. We started crisscrossing the province to make sure that we got input from all stakeholders and from consumers. Thank you.
Further questions? Member from London North Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. You know, the member from Mississauga-Streetsville also, in addition to mentioning consultations, which is something that frightens me early in the morning, but she also talks about the composition of boards, and whenever a Conservative or Liberal government talks about how they want to manipulate the composition of boards, it's rather frightening to me. The NDP has called upon the implementation or the appointment of an administrator to take over Tarion completely, which I think would be a great idea. I'm also thankful that the NDP successfully passed an amendment allowing the Auditor General or giving the authority to investigate Tarion. Otherwise, we'd see a lot more of the same. To the member from Mississauga-Streetsville, through you, Speaker, do you think it's fair that everyday Ontarians and consumers have to pay outrageous salaries, such as those to Tarion's CEO, who has paid almost $800,000 in salary and benefits? Is that fair?
Answer. Member from Mississauga Street.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member opposite. I do apologize if I frighten you so early in the morning, but, but I have to admit, when I heard those salaries myself in committee, I was also blown away. It was really difficult to understand, not just their salaries, but the makeup of the board, that it was so one-sided. What the Tarion warranty program, the way it was put together, the way that they had the 30-day windows at the beginning and at the end, the fact that they were not providing the consumer the appropriate documentation at the time of purchase, all of that in and of itself showed an organization that was so out of date and very poorly put together. And we took swift action. We heard members from the opposition who told us what they wanted to see, and we immediately, right away, we got rid of the chair and the CEO to make sure that we can now put good people in there to support consumers.
Further questions? I recognize a member from Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we all know, purchasing a new home is one of the most significant investments someone can make in their lifetimes. Many Ontarians have been eagerly awaiting improvements to the new home warranty program in this province after years of Liberal lack of action. Could the member please tell us what our government is doing to enhance the home warranty program in Ontario to protect the homeowners? Thank you.
Answer. Member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to my neighbouring member from Mississauga, Erin Mills. I'll talk a little bit about some of the enhancements that we are making under the warranty program, home warranty program. First, we want to make sure that we overhaul the whole warranty program in a way that protects the interests of new home buyers, and we're taking the time to make sure we get it right. That's why we're establishing a mandate for Tarion to promote the resolution of claims as soon as reasonably possible. We want to make sure that builders, developers and their agents and all of those that participate in part of a new home being built are held accountable. We want to make sure that they understand that there are consequences so that they will build the proper homes in the first place. So hopefully Tarion won't even need to exist.
Response.
So we want to make sure that everything is done in compliance. And the Licensed Appeal Tribunal will be there to resolve disputes between homeowners and Tarion over warranty and protection claims. Thank you, Speaker.
Further questions? I recognize a member from Niagara Centre.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank the member from Mississauga-Streetsville for her presentation. Just want to ask you, my friend from Niagara Falls touched on it. When a new home buyer finds defects in their home and the builder is unwilling or unable to fix the problem, Tarion's supposed to step in. But what they were doing, obviously, was protecting the builder. Tarion is board is controlled by the Ontario Home Builders Association, and who is the lobby group for the development industry that Tarion is supposed to regulate. I'd like to ask her, does she realize that her government's bill doesn't actually fix this problem at all?
Answer, the member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question because it is very important, which is why we're separating the warranty administration and builder and vendor regulator. We want to separate them together. The government has heard from Justice Cunningham, which is why we wanted to make sure that under the Ontario New Home Warranties Plan Act with Tarion, we want to address this conflict of interest because it was of serious consumer concern. At this time, it is expected that the future regulatory authority will hopefully get that up and running by the fall of this year because we do want to make sure that we have that separation between the builder and the HCRA. Thank you.
Further questions and answers quickly. Member from Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for her comments today. In my riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore, the condo market has just exploded, and we actually have more condo units now than we do residential homes. So now more than ever, consumer confidence is extremely important. So important that I'm actually just sent out a mailer to my condo owners with a feedback card. And for the member, I just wondered if you could expand on what we're doing to modernize this legislation to reflect the needs of our condominium owners.
Thank you. Answer, the member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Etobicoke Lakeshore for her question. So we want to make sure that we're proposing these regulatory changes to condominium living. We've heard loud and clear from these stakeholders. They want clear processes. They want to make sure that they have access to cheaper digital services because that's not acceptable right now. We want to make sure that prospective owners have a one-stop shop so that they can find...
Thank you. Further debate? I recognize the member from Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to have an opportunity to speak to Bill 159 today, Rebuilding Consumer Confidence Act. This bill, like many bills that we see before us, is an omnibus bill, and it touches on a range of issues. But Schedule 5, which addresses Tarion, is the part of the bill that interests myself the most, and so that's where I will be focusing quite a bit of time. I have to say that there's a real missed opportunity to make some positive changes that could really have helped the lives of homeowners in my riding of Hamilton Mountain and across Ontario. We have known about the challenges and issues relating to Tarion for years. Under the previous Liberal government, nothing was done to address them. Now, under this government, we're seeing changes that so far do not go far enough to reform or replace the troubled organization. It's important that we take real action on Tarion. The issues with Tarion are about protecting consumers who are making the biggest and most important purchase in their lives. For too many, the dream of home ownership becomes a nightmare when frustrating or dangerous construction problems happen and Tarion abandons them. We've all heard the horror stories of home buyers who find out that the company that built their home did shoddy work. Maybe it was a broken HVAC system or a water heater that doesn't work, or there's mold, or there's cracked foundations. In all of these cases, home buyers are on the hook for thousands of dollars in repair. That's why an organization like Tarion, if it worked correctly, is so important. Tarion is supposed to be the place that homeowners could go to get help and recoup their cost. Instead, for many years, Tarion has been protecting the interests of builders over the consumers. We've seen the stories. They come up in the media all the time. We hear them in our offices on a regular basis, and members of this legislature have heard those very difficult stories from homeowners themselves as the committee traveled. We all know that homeowners have complained that Tarion regularly refuses to help them. We also know that consumers have found themselves in court, not only fighting their builder, but also Tarion, the organization that was supposed to protect them. New Democrats have been raising this issue for several years. Thanks to the work of New Democrat MPPs, we were able to amend a Liberal government bill to allow the Auditor General to look into Tarion. And I believe I've heard this morning that that was the member from Niagara Falls. that made that happen. New Democrats, as the member from Niagara Falls, then requested the AG to conduct an investigation. The Auditor General found that our suspicions were correct. Tarion has been protecting developers and not the consumers. To quote the Auditor General's report, quote, "We found that the strong presence of home builders on the Tarion Board of Directors, combined with Tarion internal requirement that it seek advanced consultation with the Ontario Home Builders Association on any proposed changes to its regulations, created an imbalance at Tarion that favored the interest of builders over homeowners," end quote. That's the Auditor General stating clearly that Tarion works in favor of the developers and the home builders. Also, Tarion is supposed to act as a backstop when builders who are actually responsible for the warranty fail to deliver. Unfortunately, the AG determined that Tarion did not collect enough refundable security deposits from builders to cover the cost of homeowners' claims that it might have had to pay out. As a result of the money Tarion had to pay out, because builders refused to honor their warranties, they were only able to recoup 30% of it. That is a huge savings for bad builders. We also learned that the leadership salaries at Tarion were shockingly high. Tarion CEO was receiving over $700,000 in compensation, all for siding with developers over homeowners. The AG report also found that Tarion's executives were enriching themselves at the expense of consumers due to a compensation framework that rewarded officials who denied consumer claims. So Tarion's senior management were given large bonuses, sometimes up to 60% of their annual salary, for increasing profits and minimizing financial aid paid to homeowners who were seeking their help. That is absolutely shameful. Further, Tarion has received the AG's report and promised to adopt the recommendations. But the Globe and Mail discovered through obtaining internal documents that Tarion was quietly backing away from many of the consumer protections it had promised to implement. For example, one of Tarion's arbitrary and unfair rules was that the claims had to be filed within a 30-day window. Many homeowners missed this deadline even just by a few days and thus lost their warranty protection. The AG asked for this rule to be scrapped. Instead, Tarion is keeping it. We have a situation here in Ontario where our homeowner consumer protection organization is run by the agency that it's supposed to oversee, and they're giving themselves bonuses to congratulate themselves for abandoning consumers. This is clearly so broken, and I cannot believe that it's still in place. Tarion is so broken that some of the things that the AG reported just seem absolutely absurd. For example, Tarion's call center was determined to provide inaccurate information in 14% of the calls. All of this from a consumer protection organization. Does that not sound ridiculous? I believe it's ridiculous. Ontarians deserve to have a peace of mind that the home they are buying is safe and in good shape, and that they are protected from bad actors. New Democrats have proposed solutions to Tarion several times over the years. Former MPP Rosario Marchese and Jagmeet Singh both tabled bills to create more transparency with Tarion and to give the Ombudsman oversight into its operations. We've been talking about this for so long that I went back and checked and seen that Rosario Marchese's first Tarion reform bill was tabled a decade ago in 2010. He then introduced bills on Tarion reform in 2011 and 2012, and we've been trying to push for solution for many years. Most recently, our New Democrat member from Humber River Black Creek introduced Bill 169, Home Warranties to Protect Families Act. That bill would eliminate Tarion and would replace it with a new agency, not another delegated authority over which the government and the people of Ontario have no control. All existing Tarion cases would be immediately moved into this new agency. That bill would also open up the new home warranty system to a multi-provider model, which is a recommendation from Justice Cunningham's 2015 review of Tarion. The multi-provider new home warranty system exists in other jurisdictions in Canada, like BC and Alberta. The builder would be responsible for finding their own warranty provider, and that provider would be in charge of providing the new home warranty. The new government agency that the bill would establish could also provide new home warranties. Either way, there would be no monopoly of the warranty providers. The bill tabled by my colleague also directs the new agency to open up past cases that were rejected by Tarion in order to see if those rejections were justified. That bill, Bill 169, offers a real solution to the issues that plague new home ownership. Stakeholders like Canadians for Proper Built Homes and others all overwhelmingly support Bill 169. And they also believe that this government bill that we're debating today does not go far enough. In their view, the bill, quote, does not go nearly far enough to provide adequate consumer protection, and it is taking far too long to address the serious issues with Tarion, end quote. Further, every homeowner who testified at the Standing Committee on Justice Policy traveling sessions in Brampton, Windsor, and Ottawa have all said that Bill 159 does not go far enough. We need real action on Tarion to protect home buyers, because ultimately, real people's lives are affected. And here's a quote from the committee, from Krista Schumann, whose husband, Dr. Earl Schumann, took his own life in 2016 after fighting Tarion for 27 years. Quote, the impact of the Ontario government's inaction and its lack of oversight has been devastating for many families. It's extremely disappointing. 1 year after MPPs Walker's announcements of their promise to correct Ontario's new home warranty program, and not enough has been done. Through Bill 159, the Ontario Conservative government has had an opportunity and also a duty to protect Ontario families in the most important purchase that homeowners make. Our government has failed to protect us from building code violations and the impacts on the financial, physical, and mental health of Ontario families, including my own, end quote. That's a big story to come to the committee to share. That says a lot about how many people are at home facing these issues that don't get the space to come to committee. I thank her greatly for putting herself and her family out there for the best interest of people of Ontario. Tarion's failure to adequately protect families in Ontario has had a real human impact. This bill does not go far enough in ensuring home buyers in Ontario are safe. I wanted to talk about a couple other sections of the bill, but I see that our time is ticking and I may not have the opportunity to get there. But some of the major issues that are addressed in this bill, again, that do not go far enough, are the 12 delegated administrative authorities and the ticket sales that we have for events was something that we thought we were making headways on to try to get fixed, and then when the Conservatives came into power, they changed what had been done, and now they're doing very minimal changes to ensure that ticket sales are correct. I know ordering online, many times you can order and find it at American cost, and I see that...
I apologize to the member, but I am compelled to interrupt her as per the standing orders, since it is 10:15. And that means it's now time for member statements. And I recognize the member for Beaches East York.
Thank you, Speaker. COVID-19 is bearing down upon